Perfect. All right, here we go in 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Daily Grind. My name is Kelly Johnson, your fun and friendly host, and we are on episode 27, the very best one yet. We're here live from Milwaukee, Wisconsin at the MKE Run Fit Fest presented by my nonprofit, the Kelly Johnson Foundation. And this is our first time doing a live podcast, videos, right on site. So super pumped to have our special guest on today, a fellow runner, and fits in perfectly with our fun festival. So without further ado, let me introduce Paul Maurer. So he's a Milwaukee native, chiropractor, runner, and author of the Unforgiving line. Lives and works in the Milwaukee area. So welcome, Paul. Woo!
Hello. Thank you for having me here, Kelly.
Yeah, thanks for being on. I'm so excited to talk and have a fun conversation and learn more about what you do and what's going on in your life. So I guess we want to give our listeners a little intro on who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
Well, I originally was born in Greendale and lived in the area for most of my life. Had spent some time out in San Diego and Arizona, different places for different reasons. But currently live towards the Wind Lake area, town of Norway, and currently I'm paying the bills as a chiropractor for Maurer Healthcare. And but I'd love to do some writing on the side, and that's when I've written this, the Unforgiving line.
Wonderful. That's so cool. You mentioned too you have a great family into sports and everything.
Yeah, I have three boys, and my wife Sue. She had been a college athlete, scholarship, distance runner, and boys involved in different things, whether it's wrestling or soccer, quite a bit of it. None of them wanted to run, said it was too boring, but but they performed in other sports, and they're all doing very well. So
that's great.
All on their own, growing up.
Yeah, did you have an influence on them getting into sports, or how do you get into running?
Well, the two questions. Me running, I was always very competitive-minded, more the basic sports. I would say things like football, baseball, basketball. But as a freshman, I came into high school at 88 pounds, probably 5 foot tall. My football dreams got squashed way back when. But I did find out that I could compete in cross country and running, and with some early success, even though I was pretty small. Kind of stuck with that for basically 45 years now. Boys, my wife has been a soccer coach. She played that in college a bit, and they got into different sports like that through all the years too. And I think we did influence them because we were always active or sporting events or seeing me running or competing or whatever it might have been. So there's always that influence when they watch you and learn that it's okay to sweat.
Mm-hmm, yeah, definitely. Great sport in general, physical activity, to work out, stress reliever I use for myself. I'm a big marathon runner, just tapping into that longer distance. Mm-hmm. Are you currently training for a run or part of a group?
I train mostly on my own. I just enjoy that. I guess I like that quiet in my head, if you will. But I have run with friends, etc. As I just turned 60, I still compete, but a little different level. I do duathlons. I'll be doing a bunch of those this summer. Mm-hmm. A couple half marathons I plan on doing this Strider half marathon and probably Kenosha. I did that last year. Mm-hmm. And I do some long distance cycling. Did the ride across Wisconsin last year. That was a single day ride across the state. So I have plans to do that, and I pretty much work out most days, to be honest.
That's great, yeah. And being a busy person like yourself, as a chiropractor full-time, and being an author and running too, how do you fit in, or how do you juggle stuff? It's a challenge at times, but I potentially, I guess you just develop that discipline that becomes part of your life, and part of who you are. And I don't feel quite right when I don't work out. It's kind of an odd thing. It's that positive addiction thing, but it works for me. And I just feel better. I'm more productive. I'm happier when I do things. Whether it's usually I like it more at night to work out, but at lunchtime I can squeeze in a run at work. We have facilities there, so I can do that. I do bike to work some mornings in the summer. So if you want to, you can find a way. It's really a lot of excuses, but you can get around those if you make that choice. Yeah, I totally agree. I try to work out at lunch when I can, fit in the workouts. Right now I'm currently training for the Boston Marathon. Was qualified and able to get in, so it's coming up pretty quick. With running in general, I think it's a great sport, and like you mentioned, having a balance of both
doing other sports or just staying physically active. I think that benefits not just your running career, but also from a work perspective or mental health in general.
Absolutely. Yeah. The mental health part, I think a lot of us battle a little bit of stress and anxiety and things like that. For me, running has certainly helped me calm that part of me and become healthy, if you will.
Do you see a lot of people as a chiropractor with running, just have a running background, or your clients?
When I first went into chiropractic, that was somewhat my intent, was to be like a sports medicine, sports chiropractic. It hasn't quite gone in that direction, but you do see some, athletic injuries. A lot of times, chiropractic is known, obviously, back pain, neck pain, things like that. So it's not purely any sports, practice, if you will. In Aurora, we see a lot of older folks and chronic problems and things like that. So sometimes just the way it develops, what your intent might have been early on, it does change sometimes and morph into something different. But certainly you see an athletic segment along with a quote-unquote normal, average population too.
Definitely. That makes sense.
Sure.
So maybe let's transition to how running has influenced you writing, or benefit both ways, or?
Yeah, it's interesting you asked that, because I was thinking about that on the way in today. Even creating this particular novel, I don't know how many times I'd be out riding or running and something would pop into my head. Maybe I was stuck on a plot line or a phrase that popped into my head or something, and I literally have to say it 3 times in my head or 5 times in my head so I remember it, so when I come home I jot it down. So a lot of the creativity can really happen when you're on the go, and it's subconscious. I'm not even actively thinking about it. So I think running has really helped, and certainly when you feel energetic, and I could come back and crank out some of the work. So it's kind of works hand in hand as far as that part of my mind and the exercise aspect.
Definitely. I was going to ask, was there a particular life experience or on a certain run or something that happened that has got you inspired to write the Unforgiving line? You mentioned too you wrote a previous novel.
Yeah, about 2005, I wrote a novel called The Gift, a runner story. Looking back, I can't really read it now because it's cruder writing. It's not as good. It's not as skilled. There was a good percentage of runners that read it, a couple thousand or so, and they liked pieces of it, or runners liked things about running. But I always wanted to write something better as I'm more mature and have gotten better at writing. I wanted to improve on that story, and they're very different, but sort of leave my own. Legacy sounds too strong a word, but just something that gave evidence to the importance of running to me, and part of it is the different cultures of running, different generations of running. So I try to blend a few, the old and the young, and hopefully that will appeal to people, that there's a long history in distance running. And sometimes as a young person, you don't realize that. You think you're the one inventing this or that, and you can go back and see all these incredibly runners that just ran because they loved to run. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about, it was really about the competition and something they were drawn to do. And so I wanted to write something that sort of blended the old with potentially the new.
Very nice. Yeah. So for our listeners out there, Paul Maurer, so he just wrote and released the Unforgiving line. So yeah, do you want to tell our listeners a little bit about intro on? I don't want to steal too much, or
no,
a little teaser, or.
Sure. No, as I mentioned a moment ago, it is about generations, and the storyline is there are 2 main characters, and one is Mac, and his name is Thomas McCarthy, Mac for short. He is a runner from the late 60s that at a key moment of his life, he was a very highly competitive runner. He failed in the 1968 Olympic trials in the 1,500-meter run, and he basically, won't give that storyline away, but he failed at a pivotal moment, and he's never been able to sort of forgive himself for that failure. So he's carried that burden with him through his life. And he is basically retired, living up north with his wife, and he encounters a young runner that he just recognizes the ability of this boy running in the up north community. And it turns out this younger runner, his name is DJ, and he is a transplanted Chicago youth who has come from a broken home and living with a father he barely knows. And Mac and DJ form a friendship where they're basically mentoring each other to become whole, and they both have had some love lost and regrets, and try to find redemption together and basically happiness, and using running as a vehicle and a thread throughout the story, the past and the competition, the athletic mind, along with family and friendship and other storylines is the goal of the story.
Yeah, very interesting. I read your novel, and I had a personal tie in regards to myself living in Chicago now, but I grew up in Wisconsin, and I think just the personal ties. Did you have like a goal of having it more like a Midwest setting?
When I write and what I have written, I need to be able to sort of see the visual of where it's at. So I have written a few things based in Wisconsin-ish. I can't create a world. I envy people that can do like Lord of the Rings and create characters. I need to sort of see it in my head. And I always feel like some of my characters, I have to be able to get inside the skin and then see out and see what they feel, what they think, what they touch. And that's how I write anyways. And so I've always used, in general, Wisconsin as a background because I have to have this kind of tangible feel of where I'm to write from how it works for me.
I don't want to give away the story, but have you drove to different parts or where when you mentioned stuff in the book or to get a visual?
In a sense, but as a family, we always had a place up north that we used to either rent and now a family owns it. And so it's kind of mid-Wisconsin state that I view as sort of the middle part of up north Wisconsin. So it's something that we grew up in since I was a young kid, and we've gone up there every year forever. So that is ingrained to me as just a different culture, but it's where what I liked in this situation was a fish out of water story with this young boy and that type of thing.
Also, too, with the Olympics, 1968, one of the main characters participated in the Olympics, or that was his goal. Did you have a tie-in? So this is 2020. We have the 2020 Summer Olympics. Did you try to tie that in?
Interesting. No, I hadn't thought of that exactly. It just is something that when I started this, I want someone to flash back to a different era, and that seemed to work. That was sort of a little before my time, but when I started running, some of the real life runners, it was roughly that's when I started to look up to them, and they were my heroes, and plastered my wall with pictures of runners from roughly that era. So I kind of went back to when I was drawn into running by using that rough timeline of the early 70s, late 60s kind of a thing. So.
Yeah, I think too with your novel, there was a lot of like for me personally as a runner, and a lot of listeners out there as well. Like there's obviously many pages in the book that I could resonate with. Like I was like, oh yeah, like I could tie in, even though I haven't lived the same lifestyle that they have lived, but I could just visualize. It was easy to visualize, or them running or practice or whatever, or different parts of the story. I think that was really clever to get that emotional tie-in.
I think as a runner or anybody competing, this isn't purely about running. I think from a competitive mind, we all share certain aspects. The need to run, the success, but the failure, and just working through all that. It's sometimes difficult to fail, but as a competitor, I try to draw that into that. There's some common thread for many of us that are not afraid to compete and lay it out there.
Yeah, or even the running terms in general too. Like you get to like, oh, I know what that is.
There might be a few terms that not everybody would understand, but you can still, I think, understand enough.
Yeah,
that appeal to more than runners, but there's a percentage of that is certainly running.
Yeah, brought the athlete out in me, and I think a lot of your audience would definitely tie. I was like hooked on right away. It was very good, like story told. And I was able to, I started reading a couple pages in, and then just kind of like snowball, let's keep on going. I got to learn what happens next. So
I'm glad to hear that. That's an intent to hook them early.
Yeah.
But if you enjoyed it, I'm pleased to hear that. So.
And then, maybe let's back up on you being an author. So on the Daily Grind, you are our first author on here. So history in the making right here. So maybe how did you become interested in writing?
It's my kids are now, oldest is 30 and the other two in their mid-20s. It's a funny start because when they were young, I used to tell them bedtime stories. And basically I'd make things up. It was just top of my head. Just about it could be a giant bunny. It didn't matter. A big frog. That's one of my first stories about some monster frog called Frogzilla. And so I'd make up these stories, and they would ask me, tell the one about this, and then I would start telling it, and they said, that's not the way it goes. You need to start writing these down, Dad. And so I did start to, initially it was sort of little stories about, little stories I told my kids, and writing them down, trying to make them into a story. So it was basically a funny start in that respect. I did do some short stories until I did create the gift story, which was my first real novel, if you want to call it that. Because running was so important to me, I started with that sort of a point. But so it was sort of a funny, it wasn't something I ever thought I would do, but kids forced me into it.
Influence on your kids. You got them running, so now they influence you, and vice versa. Yep. Did you talk to other people, like with a background in like being an author? Did you talk to other people in that space?
I had, I come from I have a business degree, but also went back to chiropractic school, so I did not have besides taking literature courses, I didn't have pure creative writing courses. But as I started to recognize the need to learn, number one, is reading some books, which at times helped. I did take some classes, whether it was online or whether it was in person through EWM Extension, things of that nature, to learn I guess I'll call it the art. Some of it's trial and error and just recognizing your flaws, or reading other books and you realize what you should do differently, or critiques. Sometimes I get a critique from someone that indicated they thought I did this or that wrong. So you learn as you go along. And again, it's sort of like being a runner. The more you do it, you tend to get better at it. So.
Yeah, you mentioned like throughout your runs, you come up with ideas and you run back home and then write them down. Can you walk us through like what was like the timeline? Me not having a background in writing, I'm curious like how long does it take to go from an idea to where you have it now?
Idea can be in your back of your head a long time. This probably was in my head for 10 years, but I had finished other things. But I started this probably 2.5 to 3 years ago. And there, kind of a weird little story, but I did start it, and I had like 30,000 words, and each book is probably 80,000 words, and I had it on a memory stick, and I basically, I did go up north to this location, and I lost it, and I did not have it saved. I wasn't the brightest person at the time, so that stalled me a bit, because it's hard to restart it when I think we looked 1,000 times over trying to find this stinking thing, but eventually I got restarted, so it's probably a good 2 years. And it comes in bursts for me. I know some writers will wake up in the morning and 5 to 7 they write, and then they go to work or whatever, or they're professionally, they do it all day. For me, it was I go in streaks where things just pour out of me, and then I'm at times not as creative, or you're tired, or something else gets in the way of life. So it is. It takes time and a consistency and to get it done. To achieve the whole goal. And sometimes I feel like I could proof. Other times I could create a new chapter. Sometimes it was doing some research on something that I wanted to incorporate into the book. So it's always a variety of things you can do in order to keep progressing towards the end product.
Yeah, so you worked on it throughout the time. Did you have a timeline in regards to I'm going to publish it at this certain date, or?
Not really. I knew it was, I finished it towards the end of the fall, and then it was proofing and finalizing it. I put out a real early version. There was a couple errors, and I had to redo it, kind of a thing. So but there wasn't an exact date. I'd hoped to get it done out by Christmas. I'm a little later, but because track season is starting, I was hoping that I'd be able to get it out there, because that's when there is more interest in running, and the Olympics are coming up. I hadn't specifically thought of that, but that all can help and put running and competing in the forefront. So.
Did you also have like personal ties or like network in regards to finding a publisher, things like that?
I have over the years. I have different things published. One is an article in a magazine and a small publisher. This is more of a self-published book. They do help you with some of the things along the way, questions and formatting. I had found that going through traditional publishing is very difficult. You almost always need an agent, which are very difficult to go unless they see they can make money, and not to be course or anything, but the bottom line is how can they make money on it, because the agent has to sell to a big publisher. Smaller publishers, sometimes things can take so long. The last one of these books took a good year to get out, which I guess I was a little bit impatient. And some of what the smaller publishers do with the current digital things, you can do quite a bit on your own. So I felt comfortable enough to use a source that I could get the book out there and son helped me create the cover, and the publishing did some things for me too, the publishing company. But it's a task you can do on your own or through traditional means. But it's your choice if it comes down to it.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about the really cool illustration on the front. How do you talk about a little bit more about that, and then also the title?
Well, the title I can't quite get away because that's part of the end part.
Yeah. Oh, I guess not the title, but I guess.
Yeah, the cover is.
Yeah.
There's a little story there because those are my spikes from 1973 or in that range.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I have a few brothers that also wore them, so they were kind of a personal thing that meant things to us. They are from that era of running, and the spikes do play a role in the storyline too as the story progresses. Also, so. It was, I guess I felt like it gave a personal touch from my background, if you will, to the story. So it kind of linked me more. I felt like it was right, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I hadn't found these spikes. My brother found them in the basement, that he had them and gave them back to me, and I was just felt right for me to do that.
Or, I mean, not giving away the title, but did you have, like, from an author, again, too, I don't have a background in writing, but did you think of the title first before you...
That would be more, I would say, later on. When you're writing, things evolve, and I know there are different ways to write, and there are some people that talk about in these books I've written or I've read about having cards in every chapter. You know what you're going to do and plan out each character exactly who they are and are their emotions and all these things. Sometimes there's other writers, and there's a great book by Stephen King that's called On Writing, but it's more of a stream of consciousness. You start with an idea and you don't know where the story will take you and where the muse will take you to create the storyline, if you will. Sometimes it takes a turn you hadn't intended, but it feels more pure to me when it's your mind just creating this storyline. And so that's how I worked. And I think I had other titles. I can't even recall what they were, to be quite honest.
You probably went through so many.
Yeah, no, it wasn't that many, but it was just that I can't remember exactly. This one has been it for a while, and I thought it was fitting for some of the storyline as it plays out. So.
Definitely. Oh, that's so great. I like the personal touch. I was going to ask you, is some of the story based on like personal, is there like kind of personal ties or based on real life experiences?
I would say yes and no, because characters and things are certainly at times, at least some of the stronger ones are based on you to an extent. And some of the things I've written, there are some dark characters, which I've gotten my wife very worried that she asked me, "What's wrong with you?" because she thought they were me, which isn't exactly true. But there are elements of yourself when you're creating stories. So certainly some things, whether I felt like I failed in a race and you carried it with you, or the younger runner, I wish I had more of a mentor when I was younger to lead me, to guide me. So certain aspects, yes, I would say are you. Other times, no. It's creating a story that you believe is worthwhile, if you will. So. Yeah,
definitely. You mentioned Stephen King as an author. Do you follow other books, athletes in general?
I don't. I probably, and this sounds awful because I know writers are supposed to read constantly. I do go on streaks. I do enjoy. Lately, it's been more biographies of usually more creative people, whether they're musicians or. And sometimes they've had struggles and redemption and that type of thing. I do enjoy that, and I would call it nonfiction. I don't read as much fiction as I used to. I do enjoy quite a bit of music, and I take the words. I like songwriters that mean something, and they can stimulate the creative process in your head. And there are sometimes a phrase that someone says that just rings true, and I won't say I steal it, but it just stimulates your own thought process, and that's an awesome line or a lyric or something like that. So there are certain songwriters that are kind of near and dear to me that have influenced me to I guess be creative if I can.
That's really cool. That has some of those songs that you add to your playlist, like those help inspire your writing?
I think so. Some artists, I know that's going to sound very old school, but like Patti Smith is an old punk poet sort of an artist. She's still creating today. Pete Townshend from The Who, some of his early stuff is awesome for me. One of the albums I've listened to 1,000 times when I was young because it kind of got me through some personal times. I think. What's the question?
Just like what songs or like music has it inspired writing?
Yeah, I think it does stimulate the process, as I said, and sometimes even a lyric, I may jot down to when I get back that that I maybe incorporate to a degree, or just the image that I created, so that is part of, again, that process. So.
Okay. Can you walk us through like your daily grind of like creating this book? Like maybe, I mean, every day at work's different for you, but like one that incorporates you writing a chapter or something else.
Sure. My tendency would be to write more at night. I seem to have the sweet spot, maybe 9 to 11 at night, something like that. And I run out of juice at whatever time when your brain just doesn't quite want to flow anymore. I do have times at work where it's a break time or it's a slower day, and don't tell my employer, but I can proofread something, or kind of squeeze in the little pieces. I have my laptop nearby, so sometimes that again would be even just scribbles on a page where it was a paragraph or two, or some type of quotes that I want to use. So it really varied for me, that it wasn't always a clean process, but it's how it works for me. So.
Yeah, I was going to mention, like, if you do set aside a time to write or create content, do you like listen to music? Do you have like different specific like habitual things that you do?
I need it quiet as heck. So I really can't write with music. Even when I was in college, I couldn't study with music on or something in the background. I need it really quiet, and I don't, it's just a distraction. Maybe I can focus or zone in better for me. So that's why I guess at night, if my wife has an early job, so if she's in bed and the kids have moved out now, it was just sort of that time that was, again, quieter for me to do, and that, again, worked for me.
That's good. Yeah, what's most efficient, what works best for you. Everyone's different, for sure. You're definitely living the daily grind in regards to being an author, chiropractor, running. What other things do you like to do, like as stress relievers or outside stuff?
We recently moved out from Oak Creek to town of Norway, which is a little more in the country, and we have basically a hobby farm, which we currently have 9 chickens, 2 horses, and a diabetic dog. So even this morning before coming here, my wife's out of town on a medical mission trip to the Philippines, so I got horse duty, which is great. I don't see it as work. I enjoy it. They're great animals, and so that is part of our daily routine, is taking care of this. Again, I'll call it a hobby farm. And projects, again, this place, a couple acres, we're redoing some things. Yesterday I was sanding a floor for 3 hours. It's part of a barn that we're making into kind of a, what does my son call it? It's a second floor Spartan gym, or that one calls the pain cave, where it's working out, and we have workout equipment up there, so I'm refinishing that. So there's always kind of something, especially at a newer place.
Yeah, you got like some project or projects plural going on in your life.
Yep.
And fitting this in, maximizing the most time. How do you stay organized in regards to doing all this?
I don't know that I would say I'm organized. My wife would probably nod her head right now that I'm not organized. But I do end up, I believe I get it done in the end. It may not be exactly on a scheduled basis, but I like to do things. I'm not a good sitter, so I generally like to perform some type of activity, whether it's working out or whether it is some simple chore or whatnot. I'm not good just lounging around doing a little bit of nothing. I need to kind of keep active. So.
Yeah, you're staying active, building that farm out there. Was that influence from the book or from your
I think Oak Creek, we have been there many years, and it's gotten so busy. We were not happy there anymore. The whole traffic, we wanted to get out in the country. My wife had a horse at a friend's place, and our goal was to kind of bring it home, the horse home, and got a pasture mate for it. The goal had been the last few years of finding a place in the country. And funny enough, I was bicycling about 2 years ago, and there was a for sale by owner sign. He had just put it out front. It wasn't even listed with realtors, and drove by it, thought it looked gorgeous, thought it'd be way too expensive. It turns out that we could manage it, and we jumped on it pretty quickly. So again, just by sheer happenstance, just out biking one day.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Well.
Biking inspires, running inspires things. Are we going to now see maybe a farm book down the road?
Again, funny you ask that, because we do have this, it's an older type industrial barn, and I have had an idea. It would be a different genre, but it'd be more like a horror story on a farm. So I don't know. It's just in the back of my head. If that comes out, I don't know. But so in a sense, I'll say yes, it is a kernel in my head at this point. Don't rush me.
I'm guessing when you do take down ideas and stuff, do you have like a notebook, or you have the memory stick? I don't know if you probably don't use that anymore because it's
no, that was a bad idea. I haven't yet for anything new, no. But in the past, yes, I would just jot down phrases or ideas or characters or things that might happen, and I would have a whole list, sometimes of pages of odds and ends. Some you use, some you don't. And as you're writing, sometimes you incorporate them or go back and you forgot you even thought about this. So it is, I do think you need to write things down or jot things down or somehow keep memory, because it can be a fleeting thought and then it's gone and you're trying to remember this relevant idea. And if you just think you remember it, probably won't, at least me. So yes and no, I did keep track of things and, again, utilize them as if it was indeed that way.
For any of our listeners out there that are looking to write a book or do what you have done, do you have any key takeaways, best practices for them?
Well, the biggest thing is don't be too critical of yourself. There are many times I don't think it's the best of writing, but to get it on a page, you have to be bold enough to not be so self-critical. Just do it. Just get it on a page. You can always edit and cut and delete and all those types of things, but don't be afraid to just put it out there. And again, that's going to be personal. No one's going to be reading it or criticizing you, but I've learned to just let my mind go and trust it. And I may come back and sometimes say, that's really awesome, or that's really awful. But the point is, at least you're not afraid to try. And it's a learning process kind of a thing, but that's the way I approach it, is not to be self-critical and choose every word. Just get it on the page, and you can always play with it later.
Yeah, that's really great advice. Did you see yourself, 5-10 years ago, or did you see yourself creating the Unforgiving line?
I had always wanted to write a more complete, better running novel, I will call it. There is probably the most famous running novel is called Once a Runner. John Parker wrote it in the 70s. And I remember reading that when I was a boy, and I remember just being riveted by it. As again, a runner's mind, competing. And it was becoming very important to me in high school to run. And he's considered sort of the best book. And in back of my mind, whether this even approaches it, I have no idea. That's for others to decide. But I wanted to potentially do the best that I could to rival this and do the best that I could in that same sort of niche. So we'll see what happens if people have any opinions on that. It might, that's, as I said, others to decide that.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's great. You expect the unexpected, but you had something on the radar, which is great. We're a very goal-oriented podcast, and daily grinders like yourself and I. So very fitting. So actually, perfect transition. What's on your daily grind, Paul, in the next coming weeks later this year?
Well, tomorrow I have more sanding to do. I might go for a long ride. It's supposed to be 50 degrees out, so ride or run is in the short-term agenda. As I mentioned, my wife's on a mission, so a medical mission. She goes to the Philippines with a group, and I have the farm to take care of, or the hobby farm, which is not the hardest thing. I have a son that's graduating from officer training in the Air Force, so we're going down to see him in March for about a 4 or 5 day range. So that's an exciting event. Other than that, sometimes it's daily living. It's going to work, and I guess we'll see what things bring. I guess how else to say it.
Yeah, busy schedule. You mentioned you running and biking. Do you have any upcoming races?
I will likely be doing a couple half marathons in the next month. There are some longer bike things, more summer-ish, that I plan on doing, and you have to get prepared for those. It's not something you just do on a lark.
Definitely.
I haven't done as many races lately, but I do like to do duathlons. A run bike appeals to me too, because it's kind of a grinded out event, which I enjoy. That challenge on yourself as much as anything. That to not give in, and do all you can do. Even I always tease that looking for guys with gray hair or balding, the age group kind of thing, as opposed to the leaders that are can't hang with them anymore. But that's okay. I had my day. At a different level.
Yeah. Stay competitive, stay healthy, stay active.
Exactly.
We mentioned the benefits of running in general in sports earlier on our episode. I think that's a really great fit, and you're doing a lot of good stuff out there. Do you have a word of the day for our listeners to help motivate them?
What I could do is on the back of the book there's a small paragraph, and I'll just try to read it without mumbling. But this is Matt, the older character, when he is trying to motivate some of the younger runners that he encounters in the book's journey. And he says, "Hopes and dreams drive us, motivate us. They get us up for an early morning run and out the door on a sub-zero day. Dreams whip us to do things that others would never consider. But dreams can only take you so far. At some point, a runner must harden. The dream still exists, but it becomes more than that. It becomes tangible, no longer just a whisper in the night. It evolves into fibers of your being, fibers that take root and become flesh. When that happens, you will know. No one will believe you, but I promise you, you will know.
Very fitting with today's episode and what you've inspired our listeners out there, motivate them to get out and run, basically, in this cold weather. I was going to ask you too, do you run and are you indoor or outdoor?
I generally go outdoor. I do have the treadmill indoor type things. I mean, it's icy or whatever. Temperature isn't as big a deal. I biked in 25 degrees. You just have enough gear on, you can do it. It's really, again, up to you a little bit. It's not maybe as pleasant as some days, but once you get going, I enjoy the outside more than inside. But I will mix it up, but I would prefer to be on the element. It just feels better to me.
Yeah, I like it. More natural. It's like, I don't know. I like being outside as well. You can only go so many miles on a treadmill.
It gets dull fairly quickly.
Yeah, it gets dull.
But it's if you're trying to squeeze it in, sometimes that works. So
definitely. I'm not no author, but like when I go out on runs, I feel like outside, like my mind opens up to different things to think about. To be honest, I think I thought about the MKE Run Fit Fest on a run, but I can't tell you which one.
Sure. Excellent.
Yeah, really great stuff. Paul, how can our listeners, where can they get your book?
Sure. It just was released on Lulu Publishing, Lulu. That's the straight to the publisher, or it just became released on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, so that it would be available to the Prime, free shipping, all those types of things. It is available on the big ticket items like that, like an Amazon. So just came out, I think, a few days ago on Amazon. So it's kind of fitting that I'm able to be here.
Yeah, wonderful. Perfect timing with our live podcast episode. We'll put Paul's contact info in our show notes for today. Want to say thanks again for tuning in to today's episode, and a big thank you for Paul for coming on to our podcast, our first ever video podcast. When it comes to sharing my story, be sure to follow the Daily Grind at KJF Daily Grind on Instagram, and me, your host, at Kelly J. Lefty on Instagram and Twitter. Make sure to go to our podcast network website. We're on ambiguousproduction.com for more content, such as our other podcasts on the network, You Mad Bro, the Sam Bustle podcast, and GDP, Goal Driven Professionals. Listen on Google, Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. Until next time, I'm Kelly Johnson. Have a great day.